Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hawk's Nest. We've got a really great show here lined up for you guys. We're going to do a deep dive into the Greg Olsen signing, covering that one from end to end, as well as we'll get into some of the swirling rumors out there regarding one Yannick Ngakoue, the very talented Jacksonville Jaguars defensive end who is reportedly on the trade market, and our Seahawks are reportedly very interested in acquiring his services. As well, we'll get into a little bit of the ongoing negotiations at play somewhat publicly between Clowney's agents and the Seattle Seahawks front office. Got a few quick hitters for you at the end. But first up, third leg Greg, one Mr. Olsen.
To the end zone. Olson, did he hold on? Yes, touchdown.
Well, our Seahawks started off this offseason with a bit of a bang by signing Greg Olsen, former Carolina Panther tight end, to a 1-year, $7 million deal, $5.5 million of which is fully guaranteed, which, let's face it, that pretty much makes the whole deal fully guaranteed. And while I usually do try to have a firm stand or take a firm stand here at the Hawk's Nest and give you guys a yay or nay, tell you whether a deal is good or bad, this one's firmly got me straddling the fence. There's some good to the deal, there's some bad to it. And first, looking at the bad, the Seahawks probably overpaid a little bit here. You got into a little bit of a mini bidding war here with the Buffalo Bills and the Washington Redskins, both teams who were also vying for Greg Olsen's services. And if there's one thing that we know about the Buffalo Bills and Washington Redskins, it's that they're, how do I put this delicately, the armpits of the NFL. Just call it what it is. And they tend to have to overpay for free agents when they want to go out there and get them, which meant the Seahawks were going to have to overpay for this particular free agent. But that's not the biggest issue I have with the deal. It's actually the age and injury concerns that Greg Olsen brings with him. This is a guy who's going to be 35 years old next year, and he's had a couple of lower leg injuries that have been pretty serious over the last couple years. Guys, as they get into their mid-30s, don't tend to get less injury prone. And if they've had an injury that's happened a couple different times beforehand in the same place, there's a very good chance it's going to happen again a third time. And I have an issue with this mostly because the Seahawks last year their starters lost more games due to injury than any other team in the NFL, and I think it was by a pretty wide margin. You don't stop that bleeding. You don't put a Band-Aid on that wound by going out and signing aging, somewhat injury-prone players. And we saw Pete Carroll at the end of the year lean on this excuse in his post-game press conference at Green Bay, saying, the injury thing popped up too bad. We just couldn't field the team we had ideally wanted to field. The injuries decimated us. Well, again, I don't want to hear that excuse this next year if you're going to go and sign aging, somewhat injury-prone players, because just like you could have seen with Mike Iupati and Ziggy Ansah and been fully aware that Dwayne Brown was probably going to miss some games due to injury as he had throughout his career, that stuff was anticipatable. I'm going to create that word here now. It was anticipatable, and that's my biggest issue with this deal. But as we all know, nothing happens in a vacuum. And when you look at this deal, you have to look at the market factors at play. And when we look at the market factors, the term that comes to my mind is market scarcity. Market scarcity. You're going to hear me say this a little bit over and over the next couple of minutes, and just bear with me on it. When you look at how we were going to potentially upgrade our tight end position this offseason, and if not upgrade, at least provide a hedge for Will Dissly should his rehabilitation take a little bit too long, or if he has another injury during the season, you want to have at least somebody there that's a little bit of an upgrade over Jacob Hollister. You don't want to trot him out there again. And certainly Olsen is that. And when you look at it, you had a potential of free agency, making a trade, or the draft as a means to bring that tight end. So let's look at the free agent class first. The crown jewel of this free agent class is Austin Hooper. And the Seattle Seahawks were certainly interested in him. We've heard that their representatives met with his representatives, and I'm sure there was some initial talks. The problem is that phrase again, market scarcity, popped back up. Because what happened was the Seahawks realized probably pretty darn quickly that he was going to push the market for a tight end right up to the top, if not break it. We're talking $11, $12, $13 million per season, and that might have been just a little bit too rich for Seattle's blood. They may have viewed Greg Olsen as a player who is very close to what Austin Hooper is as a player, but at nearly half the cost. So what else was there in free agency as an option? Well, I know many of you have talked to me in the live stream about your love for Hunter Henry and the hope that the Seahawks would go after him this offseason. He's a very complete tight end. There's no doubt about that. But he carries a huge injury risk with him, much bigger than what you're even looking at with potentially Greg Olsen. As well, he was going to cost top of the market. But then the thing that probably X'd him off the list first and foremost was the fact that the Chargers surprised everyone by franchise tagging this guy. So now not only are you going to bring on that injury risk, not only are you going to pay the top of the market for this tight end, but then you're going to have to give up draft compensation to the Chargers as well. Wasn't going to happen. Who else did we have? You get Tyler Eifert with the Cincinnati Bengals, longtime tight end with them. Unfortunately, this guy's even more injury prone than Hunter Henry. And unfortunately, those lower leg injuries that he's sustained over his career has robbed him of his dynamic athleticism, robbed him of some of that speed. He's not the same player he once was, which I think X'd him off the Seahawks list. What else was there? Well, you had Eric Ebron. Now, Eric Ebron has carved himself out quite a nice little career in Indianapolis after having that bust label hanging around his neck in Detroit. I think he was once the number 7 overall pick. And while he's a very good pass catcher and he's somewhat deadly in the red zone, he's really not that interested in blocking. It's just not his thing, man. So I don't think that would have brought him onto the Hawks because it's kind of important if you're going to be a tight end on this team to block, right? See Jimmy Graham. So Eric Ebron, you're off the list too. That was pretty much it with free agency. There wasn't a lot of other upper-level tight ends out there that you could have gone up and plucked to upgrade the position. Okay, so what about trades? We had all hoped at the beginning of the offseason that maybe O.J. Howard with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or David Njoku with the Cleveland Browns would be available. Both of those guys were reportedly potentially available at the trade deadline this last offseason. But I've heard no such whispers right now. There's been nothing out there whatsoever, not even about them, but about any tight ends in the NFL being on the trade block. It seems like that position is becoming very valued, and if somebody's got a decent tight end, they're not letting them go. See the Chargers for an example. They're willing to franchise a guy who has had really one good upper-level year of production. So a trade wasn't really a viable option. We know the free agent market was kind of weak. What about the draft? Well, the draft, in a word for tight ends, sucks. It's really bad. And I'm not the only one with this opinion. I have scouted most of the tight ends in this draft. I see a lack of dynamic athletes. I see a lack of speed. I don't see any kind of willingness to block whatsoever. And a lot of the pundits online that you'll read also fall in line with what I'm saying here. Nobody really likes this class. And if you do go and draft a guy who's decent, chances are you're going to have to really overdraft him to bring him in. So we know the free agent class was weak. We know there were no trades to happen. And we know that this draft class pretty much sucks for tight end. Market scarcity. That's what drove this deal. And that's why Greg Olsen's on this team. There is a little bit of a slight upside to this deal, though. When you look at Olsen and you look at him throughout his career, he's always had real strong arm quarterbacks throwing him the ball, but not the most accurate of passers. Jay Cutler could probably throw it 75 yards in the air, but you never always knew where the ball was going. And the same is probably even more so true with a guy like Cam Newton, who throws just as hard as Cutler, but is maybe even more inaccurate. With all that being said, this is a guy in Olsen who's only had 4 drops in the last 3 years. He's very sure-handed. He's got a huge, wide catch radius. He's going to be able to pluck the ball from anywhere. And you have to feel like getting a guy like Russell Wilson, the pinpoint passer that Russell Wilson is, that great catchable ball that he throws. And we saw this at the Pro Bowl with the Skills Challenge, where I think he's won it for 3 straight years in a row. Russell can put the ball exactly where he wants to place it. And you've got to feel like that's going to work well with a guy who's got such a wide catch radius like Olsen and who is sure-handed. So while I don't expect him to blow up and go for 1,000 yards, I would still hope, as long as he can stay healthy, and that's a big motherfucking what if, but if he can stay healthy, then we know that he is going to be probably pretty darn productive out on the football field and a very good fit. But again, one more time, market scarcity drives the Greg Olsen signing.
How did the fans in Seattle treat you the number of times? I think you might have played there 5 times, maybe 6 times. How did they treat you?
Not great. Not great. Their fan base is awesome. I mean, they are loud. They are energetic. It's, arguably the best home environment, in the entire league. We played playoff games up there. We played a lot of great regular season games there. In 2015, we had like an all-time classic game. It's a unique and really special fan base and stadium and environment. And I'm just hopefully that I can do some things that now they'll be cheering for me instead of making my life miserable on the other side.
Well, the hot stove league was turning and churning and burning last week when we got a juicy rumor that the Seahawks were very interested in one Yannick Ngakoue of the Jacksonville Jaguars, that talented young defensive end for them who's had 75 pressures over the last 3 years, just burst onto the scene basically right out of the draft. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, surprisingly, are actually potentially willing to maybe trade this guy. I didn't think at the start of the offseason that they would be willing to move him. They had already in the last couple of years lost Dante Fowler from that team, Jalen Ramsey, Telvin Smith retired prematurely, a very talented outside linebacker for them. But then they went this offseason and they traded A.J. Bouye to the Denver Broncos, a very talented cornerback for them, and it seemed to indicate that there might be a little bit of a fire sale going on. And just like last year where Seattle was able to take advantage of the situation in trading for Jadeveon Clowney right after training camp ended, they too in this situation can maybe pounce on a situation that'll be favorable to them. They won't have to give up as much in their draft assets to maybe pick them up as you might have thought. Specifically, it looks like the deal on the table is the Seahawks would give up their first round pick, the number 27 overall, and then they would give up their second round pick, which is the last second round pick in the second round, the Kansas City pick that they got from Frank Clark. Then they would receive back from the Jacksonville Jaguars their early second round pick, and then of course Yannick Ngakoue in addition. Then foreseeably you would think the Seahawks would already have a deal in place with Yannick where he would sign somewhere in the nature of probably 18 to 19 million per year. Works out for all sides. Seattle doesn't have to give up all the draft capital in the world. They'll still have 2 second-round picks at that point, and so it's kind of a win-win deal down the line. I like this deal a lot, but I also would be hopeful that in addition to this deal, you would be able to also bring in Jadeveon Clowney. That just because you signed one doesn't mean you have to let go of the other. Imagine having both of them as your bookends. I mean, that would give you such a dangerous pass rush front, and the teams wouldn't just be able to double both. You'd have to pick one or the other. I really like the potential of that. And I know there are many of you right now, they're up in arms going, no, Hawks Nest, you are out of your mind. How in the hell could they possibly sign both of those guys to nearly $20 million per deal? They're already signing Russ to 33. They got Bobby to 15. There's only so much money. It's a $200 million cap. My counter to that argument is that look at the Kansas City Chiefs last year. They went and got Frank Clark, and it's widely reported that Frank Clark was making $32.5 million per year on that deal, right? But when you look at the cap hit last year, Frank Clark was actually down around $6.5 million per. That's what his actual cap cost was last season due to the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs in the first year of the deal took down the base so low, and it was only the bonus money that was really counting up against the cap. This allowed the Chiefs to then go out and sign Tyrann Mathieu, who sort of solidified that secondary just enough for them to hold on for dear life and let that offense be super dynamic this year, and allowed them to go win that damn Super Bowl, which is what we want our Seahawks to do. So why can't the Hawks reduplicate that? And yes, I am advocating for kicking the can down the road. Yes, I'm advocating for paying the bill later. Yes, I know that there's going to be some cap issues by pushing that money down the road. But also, again, keep in mind, the cap is going to continue to go through the roof. It's already raising right now at about 10% every year. And it looks like it's going to go far past that with this new CBA that's about to be signed. Because the CBA seems to be giving the players more and more of a chunk than they've ever had, which is just going to raise that cap through the roof. So you can massage those numbers down the line, and I would argue now is the time you do have to go for it. There is no tomorrow. Now is the time. Pete Carroll's only getting older. Russell Wilson's going to be through the end of his prime here soon. Now is when you need to strike. Go make both of these moves and build around it, and you've got that team that can go out there, contend, and potentially even go and win the Super Bowl. One little fact that I don't know if it'll make you laugh or if it'll make you cry, but Yannick is actually only 5 months older than L.J. Collier, Seattle's first-round pick from last year. A quick note in regards to the negotiations that are ongoing between the Seahawks front office and Jadeveon Clowney's representatives, because I do think that there are negotiations that are ongoing here, and I think that they are going on a little bit publicly. What you saw at the start of free agency was Jadeveon Clowney's agent essentially released through the media that he wants to break the bank in free agency, set the new market for defensive ends, $25 million per. And that's all well and good, but then we got John Snyder coming out a couple weeks later saying, we're not going over $18 million per for the guy. That's our top of the market. We ain't doing it. They can deal with that, and if they want a better deal, sign it somewhere else. What I think you're seeing happen here is, again, the negotiations. Snyder says we're going to be at $18 million. You got Clowney's representative saying 25. We probably end up landing somewhere 22 to 23 million, and we call it a day. Everybody's happy, and Clowney comes back to Seattle. I think he does want to come back to this team. You heard him at the end of the offseason say, I want to go play for a Super Bowl contender, but then you hear his agent say, well, no, we want to break the market. Which is it really? And you got to figure there's a little doublespeak going on, that them saying breaking the market isn't exactly the number one priority on Clowney's list. That's what I'm anticipating. This is my soft prediction, is that the Seahawks were able to sign both players. Or if they're not able to get Yannick, that they can sign Clowney and sign another big-time player in addition. One does not preclude you from the other. As expected, our Seahawks were awarded some compensatory picks here recently in the last week. And as anticipated, it was a pretty decent little haul. They were able to get a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, and a 6th. Now, I had hoped that we were going to get 4 total picks back, but I also thought it was going to be 2 6th rounders and a 7th. And so getting that 4th is a little bit higher than I thought we'd get for that 2nd compensatory pick. And I think it's very important. It's going to be very key to the movements of this offseason that we're awarded that extra draft ammunition. And it's part of the reason why I continually hammer that drum saying, always consider the compensatory situation when you're looking at the potential moves the Seahawks make. Because John Schneider is as good as anyone in playing that game recently, and he really understands and sees the value in pulling back in 3, 4 extra picks every year. And I would expect this offseason that game to be back at play again. We've already seen with the Greg Olson signing, he doesn't count against the compensatory system because he was waived by the Panthers. So if they go out and make a trade for Ngakoue, won't count against the compensatory system. You re-sign your own free agent like Clowney, won't count against the compensatory system. He can, again, see free agents leave this offseason like a Fetty, or who Fant might leave. Fant, who just I read recently, might get upwards of $10 million a year. You could be getting back 2 third-round picks or another 3rd and a 4th next year with some of the guys you'll lose. Sucks to lose them, but it's always nice to have that compensation sitting there ready to be returned to you if you do. It was reported today that the Seahawks are going to have Jordan Reed, former Washington Redskin tight end, in for a visit. And I'm very interested in this news, as I'd love to see that kind of signing. You got to feel like it would be probably for somewhere in the league minimum average range, maybe a couple of hundred extra thousand. He was waived by the Redskins, so it won't count against that compensatory system that I was just talking about. As well as for those of you out there who have a little bit of a love affair for Hunter Bryant, the Washington Husky tight end, who's a little bit undersized. This guy would give you kind of that kind of player. He's 6'2", he can move him around, he's a very good route runner, very good hands. Obviously, injury is the big thing with him. I don't even know where to begin with this guy as far as, quantifying all the injuries he's had, from concussions to the lower leg injuries and everything in between. But with that said, when he was going in 2015 and 2016, he was really tough to stop. One of the best pass-catching tight ends in the entire NFL at that time. Now, injuries have really robbed him. If you look at his yards per catch, you look at his catches, you look at his games played, it's all just continually going down further and further. That seems like the guy might be close to putting a fork in him. But with that said, I'd like him as a better alternative to Hunter Bryant, who you'd have to go into the 2nd round in order to get, and who I have some real big concerns as far as his blocking goes at the next level. The Seahawks are also having in this week TJ Carey for a visit. He's a former Cleveland Browns slot cornerback, and he actually had a very good year even back in 2018. This was a guy who was actually matching step for step with Justin Coleman, who was tearing it up for our Seahawks at slot corner at that time, to the point of going out and getting a massive free agent contract that next offseason. And both of those two guys at that time allowed about a 54% completion rate. Coleman had 7 pass breakups to the 8 of Carey. They both had a single interception. They were both really solid in that slot. Now, Carey started out 2019 pretty good for Cleveland, and then he went, he fell in the toilet. It was not pretty to watch. And so he was released this offseason by the Cleveland Browns. But Seattle could look at him as a reclamation project, and he would appear to be at least a little bit of an upgrade over what you had in that veteran fill-in last year, being Jamar Taylor. We all hope Ugo Amadi will take the next step in his development to be that certain starter, but at least you have a hedge here. At least you have a guy who can push him. And it is very interesting to note, and I know I keep harping on this, but this is a guy who was released. So when we look at the Seahawks this offseason and how they're moving and how they're shaking, what do we see? They first go out and target Greg Olson, who was released by the Panthers, so it doesn't cost anything against the compensatory system. We see that they look at this Carey guy who was released by the Cleveland Browns, won't cost anything against the compensatory system. They're looking to potentially trade for Yannick Ngakoue. They're looking to still re-sign potentially Clowney. Neither of those two moves would do anything to affect your compensatory system. So Seattle might, I'm just saying might, not be as active in free agency as we once thought. It's not to say they won't totally dip their toe in that pool, but they might look more to the trade route to bring the talent in. It looks like the first appearance of things to me. All right, that about does it for us today. Just to let you all know, I am hard at work on the next great Seahawk moment video, the New England Patriot 2012 game, the Ya Mad Bro game. I hope to have that out to you guys soon. As well, we've got a live stream event here on the horizon, March 18th, 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the opening of free agency. I fully expect a flurry of moves and activity and trades, and I also expect our Seahawks to dip their toe into that pool right out the gate. They've been out there on the peripheral this offseason, just seeing who's available, seeing who's interested, seeing who might want to come to Seattle. This is why Coach Carroll went to the Pro Bowl to coach there, was to also recruit. So I would fully expect them to swan dive on into that pool right at the kick of free agency, certainly within the first 24 hours. So please come on in, join me in the chat. Let's discuss, let's debate, whatever you'd like to do. As always, I appreciate all of you out there for liking and commenting and subscribing. All this stuff has helped this channel just monumentally grow at an exponential pace. There are a few of you out there, though, that continue to forget, and I'm going to continue to keep telling you until your ears bleed. Go Hawks!